everybody, welcome to Caketastic Cakes. It's Jen and I'm going to show you how to make a Rubble from Paw Patrol cake. And if you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing. It does help me out. And if you need any tools or supplies, check the link in the description below. It should be able to help. Alright, to make our Rubble, we're going to first start with his Bulldozer. So I am taking yellow gum paste, I've got a lot of it, and I'm going to make a rectangle, a nice thick rectangle. I'm going to recommend you start on the smaller side with your rectangle because as we build this bulldozer, it becomes pretty darn large. I even went back and hollowed out that rectangle that you see me squaring off there with my paddles just because it was just starting to get so big and heavy. I had concerns. So just be aware. Okay, this is a big thing. All right, now I'm taking two different size circles there and I'm going to be making the treads of the bulldozer. You saw me hold up the circles to the rectangle there, and I just needed to get the idea of the spacing on it. You want a larger circle in the back, the smaller one in the front, and you want to give yourself like a little lip kind of around the imprint of the circles. That's going to become the whole mechanism for the tread and everything. And I'm going to use my marker lid there just because I kind of like it. It's weird shaped. And I'm going to make impressions in the center of each circle to look like, I don't know, the axle. I don't know the mechanics of a bulldozer. The parts that make the tread go. So once you have it all sized up properly, you're going to flip it over and then trace it to make the other one. This way, if you flip it over, they'll both be going in the right direction, which is always a good thing. So punch it out. Now you've got your two the same size. You're going to have to add the circles. So I'm using the back of the circle cutters, by the way, so it'll make a thicker imprint. And then I'm going to do the same thing before with the marker. Put a little stamp in the center of each one. I'm like, oh, look, it's like tires, except not tires. I don't know what it's called. I don't know. So yes, I'm going to put a couple little extra lines in between because I felt like it was a little boring. And there you go. All right, we already got our bulldozer well begun. Now I'm taking some black gum paste. I rolled it nice and thin and cut a little bit thicker of a rectangle than the width of the tread there, or the tractor tire thing there. So when we wrap the tread around it, it will stick out just a little bit. I'm putting some marks on the back to make it look more like actual tread. Use a little bit of water and my knife, and I'm going to wrap it around so it comes up about halfway to the front and the back. Okay, so again, it's going to be uneven. You want it bigger in the back. That's a good thing, so it's good to be uneven in this case. And also when you place it, have the back, and if it ends up that it's a little longer than the width of your rectangle, make it stick out in the back, not the front, okay? Just a little heads up there. So do the same thing for the other side. Roll out your black, put your little imprints in it to make it look like tread, wrap it around the yellow part of the bulldozer, and put some water on it, stick it into place. Okay, so see, not too bad. Already it's looking better. I took some yellow gum paste now. I rolled it out just as thin as the black tread before, and I'm basically making like bumper covers, or I don't know what they're called. We're going to call them covers for the tread on each side. So I just made a long rectangle, measured it out. It's going to go over top of the lip of the tread on the front and the back just a little bit. That way it'll cover it up so it won't look awkward that the black doesn't go all the way around or anything. Just kind of wrap it around. You'll see I'm going to make sure it lines up, press it down. There we go. Okay. So now we've got the mobility of the tractor or the bulldozer established. I keep saying tractor, bulldozer. It's a bulldozer. Okay, now we're going to do the bucket on the front, or the shovel. I don't know. Again, forgive me. All right, so I have my square. It's a little bit smaller than the original rectangle, so I'm going to trim it so it doesn't go any higher than the front there. Okay, and I want it to have room on either side of the square because when we add the rest of the shovel part, it's going to need the room to sit on the front without overlapping onto the tread or the covers or anything like that. So this is going to be the bottom part. I'm measuring it out so I know where to trim it because I want the top and the bottom there to be the same width. I don't want them sticking out. I'm cutting out two little sections, as you see oh so carefully, to make it look like, you know, how bulldozers have that kind of like forked front there for scooping or whatever the purpose is. I'm sure there's a reason, but it's there, so that's why I'm putting that in. And I am going to add a little water. It's sitting on top of a paper towel. I don't know if you realize that too, because I need everything to sit still while I am still able to move it around. I center it, and you can see now that the top, that piece there is sticking out above the top, so I'm going to trim it off again. Just like before, I don't want it to stick out above the top. I want it to be level. And since I raised it up a little bit, it now is not level. But as you can see, there's a little bit of room on either side. This is still a good thing. Now I'm taking another square, and I think it was the same size. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to put it into the edge. You see how it fits in there without getting in the way of the tread or anything? I'm going to measure out the front and the top and cut those out. So I'm going to be left with a rectangle that will fit with the top and the bottom. So it's not going to extend past. I'm going to do one for each side, and it might be a little bit different because, you know, cuts aren't always perfect and it doesn't always line up perfectly. But now I'm going to use my circle cutter there to take a chunk out of each one, level off that top edge, just cut off that extra so it goes up straight instead of curving, but leave the curve at the bottom just because I like it that way. And those become the sides of our shovel there. See, isn't that nice? And you're going to use some water. Put it against the sides. This is why, again, it's sitting on the paper towel so I can move it all around without it falling apart and making me cry or swear. And then we move on. All right, I'm going to add kind of like a ring around the top now. I'm taking some thicker gum paste, again, just the yellow, using a little water, and I'm going to create just a raised area that's going to be sectioned off. This is where Rubble's going to end up sitting. And it also raises it up to give me room for the rest of the details, like the logo, and there's an arm, I guess, that comes down. You can see it in the picture in the corner there. That comes down from the shovel into the actual body of the bulldozer. So that's what we're doing there. So I made my little framework there. And this is going to become the arm. So I took a bean, as you saw, rolled it out. It's a little bit fatter at the top than at the bottom. And I just flattened it and curved it. So there's nothing really special going on here. And then I realized when I put the water on it with my paintbrush, I did it on the wrong side. So it has to go on that side now. So I have to remake it for the right side. So I'm just doing the same thing again. I flattened my little bean there. It's a little fatter at one end, skinnier at the bottom. Bend it so it's like 90 degrees. Make sure they're the same size, which is always a good thing, or as close as you can get it. Add your water, and this time make sure you put it on the right side so that it can attach properly to the bulldozer this time. Now I know that Rubble has like a power drill or something on the back, so I'm just kind of emulating this. It's just a thick square, as you see, a little thick square. Stick it on the back because otherwise it looks really boring back there. I took a gray, I don't know, cone-shaped piece, putting some lines in it. Basically, I'm making a little tiny unicorn horn. And this is still just gum paste, and I'm going to trim off the top so it's a flat edge. Stick it under there. I have a little piece there, you see, just a little another square just to make kind of like a lid to it. I did not follow the design of his bulldozer very carefully or religiously, but you get the feel of it. You definitely don't look at that and think, ooh, nice submarine. You think it's a bulldozer. So that's kind of more what I'm going with. And I know that their newer vehicles are so detailed and so elaborate, and I just noped my way right out of that one. I'm like, nope, he sits in a bulldozer, and this is a bulldozer. Okay, now we're getting to Rubble himself. We're going to keep him basic. I am not the best when it comes to sculpting Paw Patrol puppies. I'm going to be honest, so I'm going to kind of dumb it down to make it a little more basic, and it'll look good without, killing me. So I have my yellow cone there, as you see, rounded off at the top. I shoved a lollipop stick down the center of it. Took my two brown pieces, put them in the front there. Those are supposed to be his little front legs that come out of his vest that he wears. This is his head. It's a white ball, and I smushed down the top, as you saw, with my handle, my paintbrush there. And I'm going to kind of pinch inward or roll inward on. See, I'm kind of going from side to side there, but angled in toward the center. That's going to become his muzzle. So now I have recessed his eye where his eyes are, and his cheeks kind of sit back, but his muzzle comes forward. So that's what I was doing. I'm using this straw that I cut half of it off of, so it's kind of like just a happy face, to make his little mouth. Just makes a nice little curve there. You want to make sure when you do add his mouth, put it up really high on his muzzle. He's got a huge lower jaw and a very small upper jaw. So just be careful of that. I'm going to add the brown now to his head. So I'm just making 2 circles. This part's not hard. Making 2 circles that are a decent size. You know, you can see how it'll wrap around. And then I'm going to just make them longer. I rolled them a little thinner, so now they're more oval shape. And it'll just wrap around each side of his head. It'll center in the front nicely where his eyes will be. It'll wrap around into the back and fold over the top, just so nice and tidy that it's easy. Like, this part used to stress me so much when you had to add the patches for the eyes and everything. It's not bad. It's really not bad. You just make your circles, stretch them out, and stick them on. I'm using my little ball tool here to hollow out 2 indentations that are going to be his eyes. And his eyes are set kind of low, close to his muzzle, and right in the corner of the brown of each face, each side of his face. So be careful of your location there. I added a little ball of white gum paste into each one, fill it in. Now I gave him his little black nose. It's just a little triangle. Make sure you put it up high on top of his muzzle too. His nose is all pushed up and in toward his eyes, so everything sits up high. His mouth's up high, his nose is up high. Couple little black pieces of gum paste for his eyes, 2 little highlights, and there you go. Sparkle, sparkle. He's got a little happy face going on there. Now carefully put his head onto his body, hopefully without distorting it any. And there you go. There we go. He got Rubble sitting in his bulldozer. So far, so good. Okay. Now he needs a hat. Now I took a square piece of gum paste that was pretty thick and just kind of rounded off the corners. So match it up so it's a good size for his head, and then when you're happy with it, cut the top of his head off. This is how I cheat when I put hats on things, because I am not good at wrapping it around the round head I've already made. So I just cut this top of the suckers off. I just cut off the top of the heads and make the hat flat, and then it just sits right on top. This is going to be the brim. It's just more of the yellow gum paste rolled out thin. I use the circle cutter there just to cut a brim of his hat. Square it off a little bit because it isn't actually rounded. Everything with his hat is pretty darn square. And before you put the hat on, which is like when I was like, oh shoot, I forgot this, but I was glad I remembered. He's got his eyebrows, little black eyebrows, so make sure you don't forget those. You can do it after you add the hat. It'll just be more difficult, you know, it'll just be a little harder. So a little water sticks the hat on. Now I'm going to do that center piece. I just rolled out a piece pretty thin, not too thin, but pretty thin. It's thicker in the front and tapers into the back, kind of like a long stretched out triangle, and wrap it around the hat as you see. Make sure it's flat in the front. Push up the brim up if it starts to get a little saggy. Cut off the extra in the back. And then we move on to the ears. The ears are just literally brown triangles folded over. That's it. They sit very high. They sit up against the side of his hat, like right where his head and hat connect. That's where they're going to come out, and they're going to fold up against the hat. So they're small, they're triangles, just folded over triangles. There you go, right? Like, it's not too bad. Okay, now I'm adding a few more details to his bulldozer itself. I rolled out some black gum paste really, really thin. I'm adding a couple of stripes on those arms. And I just put, as you saw, I just held a piece up, put little pressure marks where I felt like I should cut, trim it off, put some water on it, stick it on. There you go. Nothing fancy going on here. Do the same thing again. I was modeling this bulldozer after a toy Rubble that I saw with him with his bulldozer, and it had 3 stripes of black on the arms of the bulldozer, bucket, or shovel, whichever it is. So that's what I was doing here. I was just kind of copying that idea. So again, there's the 3 stripes on each side. I felt like the tires were a little boring too, so I ended up going over and tracing out some of it with my food color marker, which unfortunately I forgot to record, but it was just tracing out the indentations I made. I'm adding a little stripe of orange gum paste to either side, because remember, we had to build this up so we had room for all this stuff too. So I've got a little stripe on either side. Once it hardens, I had to let it sit for a little bit. I'm going to just freehand the logo, his little symbol on there. So you got the typical shield with a bone going through it, and in the center it's a wrench. So it's just a wrench sticking straight up with the little symbol in the center of it. I just put a circle because it's tiny and you can't tell anyway. So I mean to say, it's perfect. I copied it perfectly. Just like the paw on his hat. Now to do the cake part of it, we're going to put him aside, let him dry. He's actually going to have to set for like a day before you use him, just so he's nice and firm. But now I'm going to show you the cake part. So I have a 8-inch cake. I've got it, the one layer, as you see, all iced. I had iced the other one, but I didn't like it, so I scraped it off and it turned all pink. But anyway, I cut it in half as you saw, and then I cut the one side downward at an angle and just removed it. I wanted to give it a flat edge on one side, but then a sloped edge, as you see on that far end. And once I have it to the shape that I like, I just stacked them up on top of my other cake and iced it. Just put on your layer of icing. Once you get it all iced, it's going to go in the refrigerator until it sets nice and firm, and then we're going to take it back out. But as far as this part goes, try to make it nice and neat, but you don't got to go crazy. All right, once it's set and chilled, then I'm going to take it out. I rolled out some nice light green fondant, roll it over my pin there, my rolling pin, and I'm going to just lay it over the whole lumpy mess of my cake. And it starts to make it look a lot less messy and lumpy. It starts to look a little more purposeful. Carefully smooth down the edges, and you're going to get all those nice little rough spots, but that's okay. That's what our paddles are for, right? Just make sure you work in the indentation in the front to make it look flat and accent that slope so they hold their true kind of shapes there as best you can. All right, now I'm going to trim off the extra. Nothing surprising there. Smooth off the bottom, just like always. And here's where I kind of get started with it. I'm going to make it kind of looking like sort of a rock slide happened. So I took a X-Acto knife, made a bunch of wiggly cuts there in the front, and I'm going to end up filling it with candy that is shaped like rocks. And if you want, you could cut the whole front open to make it look like a rock face, a rock wall. I just made it look like a couple little breakaway spots. These are my candies that I'm using. The big ones, the big rocks, are actually jelly beans, and the small ones are kind of like M&Ms. They're chocolate with like a candy crunch, and I freaking love them. They are so tasty that I was just nomming on them the whole time I was doing this. But I'm just filling in the holes that I made. Make sure you go up over the edge of where the gum paste ends so it doesn't look like a rough cut edge. It's a little bit more transitional, shall we say. And just fill it in as best you can. That's where the little ones come in handy because some of them are pretty pointy. And you can just kind of like poke it in when you have just a little gap showing in between the rocks so you don't see too much of that white icing in the background. If you do have concerns, you could always color the icing that you put behind it. I didn't. I wasn't worried about it. All right, now I'm going to make a little road. I have my black gum paste. You could use fondant in this case too. It doesn't have to be gum paste. I'm just using it because that's what I happen to have the colors already mixed. So yeah, it was just easier. So I rolled out my black as you see, made a big thick rectangle, making my little dashed lines out of yellow gum paste. I just rolled it super thin, cut out some little triangles. I'm using my pizza cutter to curl off the edges there. And I wanted it so it would kind of, you'll see in a second, I'm sorry, it will wrap around the kind of the edge of the cake there and just kind of fit it all nicer together. And yeah, just put your rocks in. Don't put too many though because we're going to come back to it. The next step here is I'm going to make some safety cones, some traffic cones. Took some orange gum paste and I made a cone, as you see. Very surprising, right? I'm using just this poking veining tool I've got to make kind of an indentation right down the center because they are kind of hollow there. And I'm taking some black gum paste, cutting out some squares that are just slightly bigger than the base of my cone and stick them together. And there you go. Traffic cones, right? It's real easy. Nothing surprising or special here. I ended up making 3 of them. Make as many as you want. Don't even make them if you don't want. It doesn't really need it. It just gives it a little more color, makes it a little more interesting to look at. The more details you add, the more fun it is. So once you have them made, put them aside, but leave out the orange. We're going to take one more good-sized square, and that's going to become our little puppet work sign. So put that aside. It's got to harden before we write on it. Now I'm going to show you how I made the, the black and yellow striped tape along the bottom. I have my piece of gum paste, rolled it out, and I am putting indentations at every 1-inch mark. I have the one end that's squared off by the 10-inch line, and the other side doesn't matter. But what I'm going to do is going to go from the 9-inch mark on the bottom to the 10-inch on the top. So then the 8-inch on the bottom to the 9-inch on the top, and the 7 on the bottom to the 8 on the top. So now what I'm doing is I'm getting equally sized cuts, but they're at a measured angle. So they're all consistent, and they're all going to be the same. This makes it a lot easier than trying to just wing it and it'll look nicer than trying to lay black stripes over top of the yellow. It'll all just go together nicer now. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with the black. I just move those pieces aside. This is gum paste too, by the way. I chose gum paste for this. You could use fondant in this case. I chose gum paste because it's firmer, and when I put them to the side, they're not going to lose their shape, and it's just going to be easier for me to work with. I did the same thing though here with the black. I measured out. I only had 9 inches worth, but so at the 8-inch on the bottom went to the 9-inch corner on the top. The 7-inch on the bottom went to the 8-inch on the top, just like before. So now again, I'm having the same spaced sizes, the same shape, the same angle. Everything's going to be the same. So when I go and put them with the yellow on the cake, it's all going to come together perfectly. Now, like I said, this was gum paste, so while I was cutting the black, the yellow got a little bit stiff, which makes it nice because it was easier to set up and use. So I just just placed the bottom edge flat along the cake plate. So that was my starting point, and just pressed it on, and then just slid the other pieces into place, and they all just fit into each other so nicely. It was actually really nice because not always do my little brainstorms come out so perfectly. But this one like legit did, and it was just lovely, and it makes it nice and colorful, and it makes the bottom interesting to look at. And you can go all the way around the cake if you want. I did not. I just went halfway around the cake. But either way, it looks good, and it finishes it off. It gives it a nice touch. And now I'm going to use my fondant paddle and just make sure everything's pressed up nice and level, nice and snug together. And it's done. It looks good, right? All right, now I'm going to place a few of my cones. I put one on top of the cake, I put one in the middle, I put one on the bottom, hence why I made 3 of them. But I'm going to end up moving that one in the middle because when I put Rubble there, he's just very big. So for a little bit of color, I kind of felt like it was still a little bit boring. I added some flowers that I made, and I had stored some extra ones. I'm going to make some bushes. I took some dark green here. And these are some cheap cutters. I don't even remember where I got them. I want to say Walmart or somewhere. I just like the shapes of them. So I bought them, and I'm just making them into bushes. I'm cutting my 4 circles, mostly circles, not in half, just kind of here and there. That way you have a variety of sizes, and you can use all the pieces. I'm standing them up on the cake with a little piece of dried spaghetti. You can't really see. You'll see right here, I break off a piece, and then I stick it in behind the bush just so it has something to lean on, and you can kind of press it into the spaghetti a little bit, and it'll stick and it'll stand because these suckers are light. They're not heavy at all or anything, so nice and simple. I just kept on adding bushes till I felt like it was full at the top, as you see. I put a couple in the middle just because, not realizing that Rubble was pretty much going to hide them all, but I know they're there, so that's okay. And I had a couple extras, so I stuck them on the bottom, because why not? You have them, may as well use them, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to throw them away. Now it's time for the pop of the hour. Here he is, Rubble, ta-ta! Stick him on his road, give him a nice angle, and you can see why when we made him, I had his head turning out to the side, because that's the way I wanted him to go. See, it's like I had it all planned out or something. I'm filling up the little scoop of his bulldozer there with some extra rocks and some bigger ones. Put some more on the road itself to make it look more like a landslide. Shove that extra traffic cone back in. Now we're going to come back to our sign. It's had time to set up, so it's nice and firm. I'm using a black food coloring marker, and I'm just going to carefully write out, try to center it, try to write neatly, pup at work, because he's a pup and he's at work. And yeah, that's why. Once you have that done, I took some black gum paste, rolled it into a big long piece as you see there. I'm threading it over a piece of dried spaghetti. I cut off the edge because it was just very long. I didn't need that much. A little smush into the top back of the sign there. And I'm going to press the spaghetti down into it. It's going to hold the sign up. It's going to have it nice and straight. Ta-da! Make sure it looks good. And there you go. You got your Rubble Paw Patrol birthday cake. It looks so cute, right? I was really happy with this. So thank you very much for watching. Please check out my many other videos. I got a whole bunch out there, as well as other preschool shows too. So check those out if you have the time. And as always, thank you for watching Caketastic Cakes.